Tell me, what do you get when Catan, Dune, and Terraforming Mars all get gold medals at the Trio Bedroom Olympics? Welcome to Scythe, an economic engine building game with a sprinkling of combat, where each turn feels like a jigsaw of possibilities, intense critical decisions, and long pauses staring at the strikingly pretty artwork. But deep beneath this eye-gasming lid lies something disgraceful, something so terribly broken that you'll be begging for a wetsuit. Something that not only makes map teleportation, +3 mech speed, doubled up combat, partial worker retreats, and mech invincibility legal, but it does so all while you're staring down the barrel of a hostage negotiation. In the aftermath of World War I, 5 unique factions vie for control over a deactivated mech factory and its surrounding lands. Turns addictively roll by, punctuated with intense faction standoffs, local encounters, and the incessant need to extract resources from the ground. This game is a carefully calculated orchestra of decision-making, resource management, and nerves of steel, all to claim your faction's indisputable victory. So then why is it that if I place this leader here, or this mech here, the entire game gets held hostage? Players, game creators, board game hackers. In this video, I'll show you precisely how one faction can hold the entire game hostage, and how that list of heinous acts are entirely legal moves, all while answering the question, how much will these new revelations change the current gameplay? But first, there's board game testers, and then there's me, Pones Jones, a master board game hacker. My team and I play, hack, and unlock a game's true potential. And right now, we're unlocking what everybody's overlooked since this game launched in 2016. But none of Panian's OP insanity will make any sense until I've explained a little bit about the structure of this game. Hold up! These markers indicate when the game creators did something good and something bad, and are all part of a tally for another Scythe video. So we'll see you over there. Oh, and let me know if you've used any of these in your recent gameplay. Now, let's get into it. Bjorn and his trusty mount, Mox, leader of the Nordic Kingdom. A kingdom of weatherproof workers and retrofitted six-legged ship mechs occupying the northern portion of the map. A portion surrounded by rivers and lakes. Every faction has different leaders, mechs, and workers, but they all function the same. All units move one space at a time. Your leader encounters local folk at marked locations. Workers extract resources from the board, build buildings, and build mechs. Mechs can transport both resources and workers. Also, leaders and mechs can engage in combat with the enemy, and they share these 4 unique abilities. This is where things get interesting. See, each faction has 3 differing unique abilities, with the 4th, +1 speed boost, being identical across the board. First ability allows the crossing of a river into the described territory. Next is an outrageous OP faction-specific movement ability, and third, a combat perk of some kind. These 4 abilities, plus permanent start locations on the board, define the gameplay personality of each faction, excluding the 2 empty bases for an obligatory, real-life, built-in game expansion purchase. Jury's still out on whether I hate that or think that it's brilliant. It's probably both. To start the game, players drop 2 workers to the board. Then, each player draws a unique economy mat. It's separated into 4 groups of actions. Drop your action marker on the section you wish to play out that turn, and the game is off to the races. A race to accumulate the most money after factions tally their cash outs when one of them completes 6 of the 10 objectives. One of which is to build all 4 of your mechs. Mechs that are held in storage on your faction mat, cleverly covering up your special abilities. That is, until you buck up the metal cost to build one, unlocking your abilities one by one, or just luck out with a generous locals encounter. And it's right here, with all mechs on the board and Bjorn standing on the factory territory, that we kick off our +3 mech speed, split worker retreat, and doubled up combat hack in this game. See, once per game, when your leader reaches the factory in the middle of the board, you get to decide on a factory card, unlocking another section of actions as an extension to your player/economy mat. Now, every factory card has the same bottom row, and it's this row that gets us 1 step closer to +3 mech speed, giving us 4 spaces in total. Well, using the bottom of the factory card, we get 2 moves, then +1 speed boost, and if we end the movement in an enemy territory, we immediately initiate the next step, combat. Combat that I have no intention of actually winning, and I'm gonna do as much destruction as possible as I willfully lose. Combat happens between opposing mechs and leaders. Workers are never directly involved, and it's more of a standoff of wits than a deadly interaction. Each player is handed a dial to which they can set up to a max of 7, how much of their power resources they're willing to spend. All ties go to the attacker, so players can add 1 combat card. All of this is done in secret before the big reveal. You feel a constant state of dial hesitation as you study the opposing player's resources, trying to determine their conviction for winning. Because whatever you spend on this battle is simply gone. So spending too big could leave you vulnerable in future combat. Once the reveal happens, the winner gets the territory and any resources inside. The loser, though, well, they retreat everyone, including workers, all the way back to home base. No death, just relocation. Then they draw a consolation prize of 1 free combat card if they dialed at least 1 power during the fight. One of my other special Nordic abilities is called Artillery, where I can spend 1 power before combat to make them lose 2. I deceitfully make it obvious that I'm adding a combat card to the fight, so if they want to win, they're gonna have to add 1 as well. I then pull some legal yet dirty sleight of hand while revealing the dials. They spend a 5 power combat card in addition to the 4 they dialed, plus 2 burned from my artillery shot, totaling 11. I spend 1 on artillery and 1 on the dial. They win, meaning my workers and mech have to retreat home to base, but because of my seaworthy ability, after losing combat, the Nordics don't have to scamper all the way home. They can simply back into an adjacent lake and play it off like everything's cool. And since 70% of the hexes on the board are adjacent to lakes, this ability is extremely powerful. Oh, and since I dialed at least 1 power, I get a free combat card on my way out. Just between us, combat cards start at 2 power and go up to 5, so paying 1 power to get, at the very least, 2 in return? Not a bad deal. And wouldn't you know it, the lake I retreated to is past the territory I was attacking into, meaning we pulled off an impossible 4 territory move, and my workers stayed with me. But they didn't have to. See, I can instead retreat some of my workers with the mech to the lake, and the remaining back home. Or, if we go crazy, have 3 mechs fighting on the factory square. I could split them amongst the 3 adjacent lakes. Yes, I am bending some rules here, but hacker, remember? On page 16 under the Nordic faction, heading Seaworthy, it kind of implies that all units have to stay together when retreating, but it doesn't explicitly state that. And what happens next is never mentioned once in the rulebook. I'm talking about doubled up combat. After we retreated from losing the battle, I stumbled onto the only other faction that can enter lakes, the Panians. 2 factions occupying the same territory after one retreated from a previous battle. The rules do not cover this, but following the rules we do know means my mech is instantly back in combat, and that's exactly what I wanted. See, I used the dial 1 and get a free combat card from last battle to land me this 5, and now I'm poised for a real battle. I pay the 1 power and hit with my artillery, costing them 2 power. I then dial to 5 and add 5 more. The reveal. And victory. Anna and Wojtek are sent packing. But that's not all. Remember when I said lakes touch 70% of the territories on the map? Well, this is where everything escalates to a full-blown hostage negotiation. Around every faction's base, there's a lake touching what I call the homelands. Those initial few hexes that most players permanently interweave into their economic engine. Early on, rivers provide protection for those homelands, but that builds a false sense of security. And so seeing this, with no real way to get at me, can be an anxiety-inducing experience. With me adjacent to important territories, it requires you to hold back your forces as protection over workers and resources. Because the moment I find something unprotected, I'm gonna crawl out of the water and send your workers packing. Take all the resources for myself. And that's where we hit the OP strat that I call Mech Invincibility. It's here where your mech wreaks havoc on enemy lands, loaded right full of workers. The only way to remove you is through combat. But since the attacker loses 1 popularity for every worker they kick off the territory, the cost of winning is simply too high. So fill your mechs with workers and your mech ostensibly becomes invincible. And if you do win, I'm simply going to retreat back to the adjacent lake from whence I came. Freaking overpowered. But that's not even the worst of it. For that, we're gonna have to swap factions over to the Panians. See, Anna and Wojtek are water freaks and local celebrities, and I don't just mean in the lore. They can enter lakes from any adjacent territory, submerge in one lake, and come out in any other lake. Map teleportation. But wait, there's more! Their combat perk. In combat, do not lose popularity when forcing an opponent's workers to retreat. So as much combat as you want with 0 popularity consequences. But it gets even worse. Literally every single faction on this board playing against Panian will be held hostage at their homelands. All factions, all at the same time. The entire game brought to a grinding halt. And it all starts with the factory. As soon as Anna gets her hands on a factory card, the 2 movement coupled with the +1 speed boost gives Anna 3 squares of travel. And since there is a lake sitting directly next to her home base, she has enough movement to go into her lake, scuba dive to any other faction's nearby lake, pop out of the water, and attack into an adjacent territory. And since Anna never has to pay popularity points when punting workers from their lands, she can attack and attack endlessly with little to no consequences, meaning every single faction has to defend every single territory next to a lake on the entire map, holding everyone hostage all at the same time. Little Annie, who'd have thought? But how does everything we've just shown you affect the actual real gameplay? In this game, the player who's the richest wins. The instant a faction completes 6 out of 10 objectives, the game immediately stops, and players begin cashing in their accomplishments. The hope is that you've set up your economic engine early on, so by the late game you're accomplishing objectives and pumping out coins left and right. So most of the Nordic hacks that I showed you are mid to late game tactics, and as you near mid game, the end comes on abruptly and unexpectedly. So taking an L in a battle to move an extra space gives your enemy a star accomplishment in combat, which, unless they already have 2 of them, it's really not a great idea. Now, the invincible mech. The one with 4+ workers inside, so if you get attacked they have to burn 4+ popularity, is actually a legit working strat to keep you out of combat, and works best if you travel around the map sniping massive resource productions. But to have the vast majority of your workers just to threaten the enemy, you're gonna fall behind fast. Which leads me to my next point. Yes, parking a leader or mech in an adjacent lake totally messes with your opponent's cool. But let's be clear, these tactics only buy you some time/turns. Your opponents are going to adapt, and if you don't act on your temporary advantage, you're gonna lose out. So in short, no. Crazy tricks like these don't have lasting effects in this game, but never underestimate the power of good timing and well-placed psychological warfare. And to be real, the scuba diving lake teleportation of Anna and her mechs is straight up terrifying. Remember local encounters? How your character draws a card and chooses one of the bonus 3 actions? Well, not Anna. She can select up to 2 of them, and since 72% of the encounter locations are adjacent to lakes, the Panians get OP fast. The only way I can think of to counter this locals loving celeb is to add more players. More players means more characters on the board soaking up encounter tokens. But there's one more question that needs to be answered here. A question every single player of the lengthy tabletop game Scythe has asked before. And in this next video, we explore every inch of it. So let me ask you then, what is the fewest turns possible to complete a game of Scythe? And how quick is too quick?